And none of us were born nor knowing how to cope with fear, how to cope with anxiety, how to cope with stress, how to cope with racism, sexism, uh, how to cope with alcoholic parents,
Oh,
all the
yeah.
stuff that happens to people, right? We aren't given those tools. Sometimes we just have to flounder unless we find some tools that are given to us along the way by the people that we come across.
Fear stops us from achieving our true greatness. Are you a professional woman who is feeling stuck, unmotivated, or burned out? Are you worried about your wellness? Are you letting fear stop you from crushing your goals? If you answered yes to any or all of these, then this is the podcast for you. Dr. Charmaine Gregory, night shift emergency physician, burnout thriver, and wellness champion, along with everyday heroes just like you, will explore how to face fear in our lives and emerge victoriously.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. Be sure to click the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you get notified when the next video comes out. It only takes 2 seconds to make 2 clicks. So let's do it. Let's get back to the video. Hello, 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 Fearless Freedom Tribe. This is Dr. G, and we are back for another exciting episode of Fearless Freedom with Dr. G. And this week, we have none other than Dr. Gina Simmons Schneider with us. And she's going to tell us all about who she is and all of the amazing things that she is up to. Take it away.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here talking to you from across the world. It's one of the great things about this modern technology we have. We can make connections with people all over, which is wonderful. So, yeah, I am a licensed psychotherapist and I'm a coach. I am an executive coach where we help people with conflict and anger management and stress management issues in the workplace. And then I also do some corporate training as well. And I'm also the author of a book, Frazzlebrain, Break Free from Anxiety, Anger, and Stress using advanced discoveries in neuropsychology. So Frazzlebrain is the name of the book, but basically it's about helping people cope with all of the stuff that we have to cope with, which dovetails right nicely with what you're trying to do is help people manage fears and anxieties and develop coping strategies. So anyway, I had a long route to get here. I don't know how far back we want to go because I'm a grown up, so I have a lot of history, but I'll just touch on a few things. Yeah, I grew up in poverty where, the stress of that makes you afraid all the time about, how are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to get food on the table? That sort of thing. And so when I was 15, it was I was launched into the having to support the family,
Oh,
actually help
wow.
help
Okay.
support the family with my mom as a single mom and not making enough to make it go by. So to make ends meet. So I started out really trying to figure out all kinds of creative solutions to that. And eventually we got out of poverty, our family did, and found college and um, really found my interest in people and trying to figure out how how people's personalities can be so different and how we can see the world in so many different ways. And I was just fascinated with people and how to understand them and also how to make a living, where I can be a professional and kind of use that passion. So I ended up getting a doctoral degree in psychology and started out working in juvenile diversion programs
Okay.
after I worked for the San Diego probation department. So I worked with a lot of kids in crisis, um, girls and boys, but I remember really being moved by many of the girls who grew up in families similar to mine, a lot of poverty, but they also had they were exposed to just a lot of violence and crime and things that I wasn't
Okay.
exposed to and that kind of stuff. And so I developed a lot of compassion for, when a young girl tells you this is the safest she's ever felt and she's
Wow.
incarcerated.
Oh my God.
I remember hearing stories like that. And I thought, wow, okay, I can have this compassionate window into why people go into crime. And a lot of times it's because that's the only option. They have and they need other pathways and other options. So I got into that for a few years, and juvenile diversion programs we're trying to get kids who are first time offenders into a different pathway where they can get opportunity and employment and those sorts of things. So I worked a lot with teenagers, and then I developed an anger management program for teenagers. And then my husband had the first anger management program in San Diego. And so I was working with the teens and he was working with the adults. And we did that for many years and went from that into really trying to help people have more stress-free workplaces, because at that time we started seeing back in the early 90s workplace violence and shootings and things like that. So we started going in and decided we didn't want to be there after the fact, debriefing people after a shooting. We wanted to go into prevention. So since then, we've really been working on preventing and teaching people coping skills, preventing bad things from happening as much as we can, and encouraging people that they can cultivate coping skills for whatever situation they find themselves in.
Wow. That is incredible work. I mean, wow. Like, as I'm thinking about, you being in the juvenile centers and talking to the children, and for them to say to you, being behind bars is the safest they ever felt, that is heart-wrenching. That is absolutely heart-wrenching.
Yeah, it really, really just rocked me, because then, the first time they've had 3 meals a day, the first time they felt like there was somebody there to protect them.
Oh my gosh.
There was an officer there that if somebody was harassing them, they would be protected, right? Somebody would stop them from getting beat up, or somebody would, and it just, gosh, it makes me want to cry now, just remembering some of these girls, and my heart just, I fell in love with them, because I realized that our environment so much shapes what our options are, right?
Absolutely.
And shapes our behavior. And it's not that these kids were bad kids. These kids were put into impossible situations. And so I think that really shaped a lot of my thinking too about people. And I think early in my career, dealing with really hard stuff, really hard issues, life and death and violence and crime and, that kind of stuff, it really helped me be able to quickly assess, where people are, and also make a big impact, because our agency was actually able to. We did a juvenile diversion program in alignment with the police department, where we took first-time offenders, and the police would say, hey, this is what happens to you if you go down this road. And they would do this sort of, we're going to scare you about, how bad it can get for you.
Okay.
And then the therapists worked, and then we did it in front of the families, and the therapists worked with the families. And we would do family counseling, try to correct any kinds of things that are going on in the home that are causing this kind of behavior. Okay. And we went from the first year with juvenile offenders, there was a 65% recidivism rate in the first year, usually. So, like, the majority of them would get rearrested within the first year. And we went from that down to 5% after the program, which was huge success.
That is amazing.
It was a huge success. And it was a collaborative, community program with our community-based agency and the police department. And of course, the parents had to sign in on it. But it was, it was a program that was offered to them. So anyway, we felt really good about that, and did that for a number of years. So I think that really helps. I mean, now we're working with people who are, in workplaces and older, adults now. Mm-hmm. But the same sort of same sort of coping skills apply, right? If you don't have coping skills, you're not going to deal very well with
Right.
whatever happens in front of you. So, and they can be taught. We can all learn how to do this stuff. And none of us were born knowing how to cope with fear, how to cope with anxiety, how to cope with stress, how to cope with racism, sexism, how to cope with alcoholic parents,
Oh
all
yeah.
the stuff that happens to people, right? We aren't given those tools. Sometimes we just have to flounder unless we find some tools that are given to us along the way by the people that we come across.
Yeah, and that's the thing right there. It's like, you just never know if you're gonna come across the correct individuals who are gonna
Right. You
actually help
don't
you to move
always,
forward, right? So
a
you
lot of
might,
times it's random.
right. It's so random. And so, yes, that's the tricky piece. That is a tricky part. But yeah, no, that program sounds amazing. And it's like, what better way to like improve a community than to like diminish the amount of people that have to be behind bars. I mean, that is like
Oh
the
yeah,
crux
it's
of things, right?
huge.
And then just
Right.
and in realizing that most of the people, like you said, were only there because of circumstance. Like they did not choose that. Like that, children don't make conscious choices in that way. And it's like, if you can change the mindset, change the ability to deal with what the stressors are, then that is giving them a future. Because once they are out of the juvenile sector and they're into adulthood, they are like relegated to incarceration for the rest of their lives, like whether it's literally behind bars or the institutional incarceration that occurs when they are freed after a huge number of years behind bars. So no, that's incredible. That is really, really incredible. And so is that
Yeah,
program still in effect? Like, because I know you're not involved in
yes,
it
the
anymore, but
agency actually expanded it. Yeah, it was a
okay.
nonprofit, and they've actually really grown over the years, and they're actually doing like on-site after school
Okay.
childcare, and they've got
Okay.
all these really cool community programs going on all over. So yes, that some version of that program is still going on. I mean, I know they've probably made it a lot better than it was when we were doing it. We went off into private practice, and people took our place. But yeah, we were really excited when we went back to the executive director's retirement party, because he started this program with like just a little shoestring budget, and then it grew
Yeah.
into this like community wide, because their programs were so successful.
No,
and
that's
um and
fantastic. Proof of concept. I mean, it's incredible.
yeah, like if kids have a place to go where they're supervised after school, that a lot of the kids that I saw that had anger management issues and got involved in crime and petty theft and all these things were left unsupervised for 7-8 hours a day because their parents were
Had to
working, or
work.
their
Yeah.
parents were impaired, or some
Okay.
other kind of combination, right? And the kids had no childcare, right? There was nobody directing them, nobody giving them another alternative other than their mischievous friends and the other kids that didn't, that were kind of running wild. So
Mm.
I think that, so many of these problems are solvable if the community puts resources into these kids and gives them pathways. It's coping skills, right? Coping skills is kind of what we're talking about in terms of fear and dealing with fear and anxiety and stuff, but it's also pathways. It's like I had to be shown a pathway out of poverty. Like this is somebody who could do this. Okay, for me it was education. I could see, I happen to love learning, and I could see that, oh, I could make it. It took me a long time because I had to work my way through school, and the numbers at that time worked out a lot better than they do for young people now. But
Oh yeah.
um just because the costs have gotten so bad, and because the investment in education has gone down, the public
Mm.
investment in education has
Yes.
gone down. So you'll see these sorts of trends happen as the investment in public services goes down, you know, crime and other things go up over time. So, and the reason for that is people are strapped, they don't have enough money, they can't pay for
Yeah.
childcare, kids are left alone, on and on and
Right.
on, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
anyway, it's a good thing to have um, programs and show people, you know, pathways to alternative things that they can do with their lives that are meaningful. And a lot of kids now are doing it themselves. You know, they're forming their own support groups in their high school, and they're engaged in climate change activism, and they're you know, a lot of them are making their own support groups, you know.
No, that's good. It's good to hear. And then so you all, you initiated such a nice pathway for the young people in that system. And then you went into private. And what happened at that point once you went into the private sector?
Well, then our practice is mainly doing, we see a wide variety of individuals and couples for counseling and treating them, and for a number of things like depression and anxiety and stress and relationship conflicts and issues. And then part of our practice is also going into corporations and teaching managers how to better manage conflicts,
Hmm.
because of course a lot of things emerge in the workplace, especially as workplaces are becoming way more global and more diverse. You get very different interpretations of the same behavior, right? Because culturally, people are so different, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of companies are actually really good at developing like corporate cultural norms that are accepting of cultural differences, right? And but even with those norms, there are you know, lots of conflicts that develop because people are just misunderstanding each other, right? Some
Mm,
one
yes.
person's sense of humor and warmth and way of connecting is another person's sign of disrespect, right? And
That's true.
so we work with people on how to get out of our own biases and really be able to experience another person from their point of view, right? Not just our point of view, but there's this other point of view. I kind of think about it as time zones, right? You're in a time zone and
Yeah.
I'm in a time zone, right? And we might look out our windows and there's like different weather outside, right? And there's
Yes.
we might be wearing something different based on the weather, and but we can still in the same moment have an I thou relationship where I'm seeing you and you're seeing me, even if our circumstances are really different, but only if I can go, oh, you have, you know, a rainstorm coming, or, you
Right,
know,
right.
you have this going on in your world and I have this going on in my world, but we're still, you know, people inhabiting space that still care about the same kinds of things. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, we work with people on little empathy exercises, and also ways of getting out of our own bias, because we all have bias, we all have um, ways of organizing the world based on our own limited knowledge. I talk about the parable of the blind men around the elephant, right? And we're all
Oh,
like blind people around an elephant, and we think our little piece of the elephant is the whole world, you know, it's the whole thing. So if you're the one at the trunk, you know, you're going to describe the world this way, and if you're the one on the side, you know, you're going to describe it in a different way, and we're both right, right? We're both
yeah.
right.
Yeah. It's
There's,
part of
the
the
trunk
elephant.
is like this, and you
Right.
know, the side of the elephant's like this, and the tusks are like this. So we're all right. However, we're acting as if that's the only one right way to experience the elephant, right? And because our vision is limited, because we only see in reflection, we can't really see ourselves purely. And because we have limited perception when we do see, and we don't hear everything accurately, and we don't record it accurately, and we put it through a big interpreting machine and then spit it out and it comes out completely different, right? So we are blind in a certain metaphorical way. We're all walking around blind with limited senses, picking up just our little piece of the world. And the way we get to know more is opening our perception to, oh, you're at the tail. Oh, and the tail. Oh, we're attached to the same beast, you know?
Right, right.
Oh, okay. Well, here's my piece of the beast. Let's talk. Let's have a dialogue. And you can share with me your truth, right? Which is just as true as mine.
Right.
And when people see it that way, or we can back off a little bit from our initial assumptions, then we cope better with others. And we actually, it's actually quite exciting to have your world broadened,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like travel
absolutely.
does that. Like when
Yes.
you traveled, right? I'm sure you just were like,
Oh yes, we
whoa,
love it. We love it
people see
every
the
time.
world this way.
Oh yes,
It's like a
absolutely. Yeah, there's always something neat that you learn. I mean, and and it is really funny because even if you're someplace where the language is different or the food is different, it's still the same like basic construct though, right? I mean, it's still like people have families, or they have direct families, or they have families of the that love them and that they love, and they're doing something in their communities, and they're doing things that they enjoy doing. So no matter where we are, no matter what language, it's still the same basic construct, which is really neat. It's just it's
It
just
is.
as you said, that part of the elephant is just like relayed differently.
Exactly. And it's like, but you're right, we all share the same planet, and we all have like, right, love. We all have these similar emotions, and we all have food, right?
Yes,
Hopefully.
food is
Um,
amazing.
and yeah,
We all like seem to like want to have a lot of things surrounding that too.
yes, exactly. We have rituals, right? We
Yes.
all have rituals. They might be different rituals,
Yes.
but
Hey, it's Dr. G, and I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you for listening to this episode. I'm so honored to have you here with me. Did you know that I can help you to get your own podcast started? With my podcasting launch course for professionals, I walk you through everything you need to know about starting a podcast. I'm with you every step of the way, from sign up to launching your show, with 5 episodes ready to go. There's a done for you version that's also available. If you would just rather just do recordings and leave the behind the scenes work up to us, then that one is definitely for you. But either way, we've got your back here at Fearless Freedom with Dr. G. Oh, if you already have a show and you need production services, we have monthly plans available for you. So check out the links in the episode show notes for more information. Let's get back to the show.
I remember going to in California, they have the children, and when they're in the 4th grade, the children all go do this mission, California missions, because the missionaries set up all these missions all along California. So it's part of our history of our state that we study
Okay.
the missions and how the
Okay.
missions were built and which missions were built, when. And so the children often have to do a field trip to a local mission, which is a
Okay.
Catholic, religious, and they're usually quite beautiful architecture and so on. And so I remember one of my daughter's friends was Hindu, and her mother was there on the field trip. And so we were looking at this tableau of this Christian tableau of the story of original sin. And it has Eve being tempted
Mm.
by the serpent
Mm-hmm.
to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. and it's a life-size tableau that was created, and depicting this whole scene. And I was talking to this Hindu mom, and she's like, I was like, yeah, and Satan tempts the Eve, to get her to eat from do what God said not to do. And then that caused them to be ousted from the garden, and they had to, they were ashamed, and that caused, all of this suffering in human life and stuff like that. And she just looked horrified by that story. She
Oh,
just
really?
was like, what? Are you kidding? Like, so this Christian story that many of us who grew up in a primarily Christian culture, right? It was a very familiar old story, but to somebody whose
Yes, yes.
religious myths are completely different, and religious
Yeah.
beliefs about the origin of human life are completely different. It was just such a strange
Oh,
story. So
yeah.
when I saw
Yeah.
that for a moment from her perspective, like, yeah, the serpent and the God and it's a very odd story when you see it
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
someone's perspective who has never seen the world that way. They've never seen
Oh,
the world presented that way,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just a long story to show how it helps, I think, to get out of ourselves a little bit sometimes, and out of our own perspective of like, this is the truth, this is the way
Right.
things are, to,
Right.
well, actually, other people see it completely different and have never
Yeah.
heard that story before, have never heard it before.
That's true. Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
definitely interesting to think about because yeah, I mean, it goes back to that elephant again. Like that is
Yeah.
the elephant analogy is very poignant because it's just like, wow, it just explains a lot of things.
Well, even
Oh my
married
gosh.
couples, right? Who
Oh yeah.
married
I mean,
couples.
it's just like
Well,
every time there's a communication breakdown, it's like, wait a
yes.
minute, we're talking about the same thing, but it's just how it's conveyed, the person's point of view, as my kid like to say, POV, that's what they say these days. And so it's like
Yeah. Everything's
just so
abbreviated, right?
many, yeah, everything's everything. I'm like, what is that? What does that mean? Like what do those letters mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a good one. It's a good analogy.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
like the story because I always remind myself too. I'm always catching myself on these things that I'm teaching my clients because, it's easy to slip into this. My way of seeing things is so obvious and true, right? Why can't everybody see it this way? And I realize, I have to go back to, well, I'm seeing this one piece, and there's many other ways of looking at it.
And that's a good way to step back and really analyze what vantage point you're on or at, or I guess and because yeah, there's just so many. And it's funny, but like to make a medicine analogy. So okay, radiologists, I'm gonna be a shout out to my radiology colleagues. When you get an x-ray, you don't get one view usually. I mean, there are times when you have to get one view because the patient's not stable enough to move, et cetera, et cetera. But like that's really only a chest. But so if you're getting an x-ray and you're going to get multiple views, why? Because if you look at the x-ray and in only one view, you might miss some important information. So even, for example, wrist x-ray. So you're looking to see if the wrist is broken. You only get one view. You may miss a fracture. You get the side view, for example, this fracture becomes the fracture equals break becomes very, very obvious. So that is it, right? It's like the vantage point, like how you're looking at the same thing
I love that
really
analogy.
determines how it looks, like what the actual truth is, right? What is actually happening.
I love that analogy, and that's so true because we can be so convinced, and that's how magicians do their magic shows. Is they fool us, right? They
Yes, they
fool us
do.
all the time to make us convinced we're seeing something, that it is all done with high level of skill. I also think about sports, like, in sports you'll watch a play, and you'll be convinced that, that was out of bounds. That was out of bounds or something. And then you'll see the other camera view and it's like, oh no, they
I
were
was
in
in,
bounds. Or,
man,
yeah, it
side of the
was
line.
in. So, that's the kind of thing where, again, it's all about perspective. And we can just be so certain about things. And it's really important to just back off from our certainty sometimes and going, okay, that's my perspective. That's what it feels like to me, but it doesn't mean I'm right, or it doesn't mean that that's the only right solution. Because that's the other crazy thing about the elephant, is that you can be describing something completely different and still be right.
Oh,
You're talking
absolutely.
about the same thing. You're talking about the
Yeah.
same exact thing. And your perspective is so, so different.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's so true. Yes, we see this happening in our house with 3 children. What happened? Oh, this what happened in one version, the next version. You're like, okay.
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of times there really is a need, especially like kids around like what 8 to 11, they're very rule conscious, and they're just like, you broke the rule, or you're not, or and it's really hard to convince them that, yeah, well, there was a different way of interpreting the rule, or
Right.
you know we gave you a second turn, so we have to give him a second
Right.
turn, right? Or,
Right.
or whatever the rules are bending a little bit here,
Yes.
so we have
Yes.
to. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Parenting is its own thing, right? It's its own
Yeah, it's a
challenge.
definitely a completely different scenario that nobody prepares you for, and is
No,
uniquely different for you and each child. So
and each child is its own universe. Is
that's right.
they're their
That's
own,
right.
yeah,
They
own set
really
of
are
challenges.
individuals for sure.
But they teach us a lot. They teach
They
us a
do.
lot.
No, they do. They do. Yeah. Definitely grateful, because yeah, it's kind of like one of those things, like whether you have your own children or you adopt children, or whatever however you parent, it's like you're not prepared for it ever, really. But you can never see it once you do it, like you can never see yourself not doing it. Like you're like, what was my life like before I was a parent? Or what was my life like before this? Like it's just it's a very strange thing. It's like, I don't know, you can see yourself and you could like envision yourself before doing other things, but for that thing, it's like, wow, yeah, how could I have lived before doing this? Or how, what was it like before doing this? Like you just don't remember. It's really
It's
strange.
true. It's so true. It's like you can't even, you are transformed. And neuroscience shows too that our brains are really transformed. It's really fascinating. There's so many cool, interesting things that happen to our brain in parenthood. Both fathers' brains actually, the part of the brain within the first 4 months of having a child, fathers, the part of the brain that's associated with nurturing is bulked up, and for mothers too, which I thought was really interesting. And that, we also know, I mean, obviously moms have, if you're a biological mom, you have all these physiological changes, but even when you're an adopted mom, you have all these physical changes as well, from picking up a child, putting them down, doing all this different kind of movement, changes your body and changes your brain. And then there was these wild studies on male chimerism, which is called, basically um, they found that some mothers, the DNA from the child is in their brain.
Oh,
You
wow.
probably, yeah. And they call it male chimerism, but basically, and the reason why they could determine that it was the child's DNA is because, if a mother had a male child, the mitochondria would show up different, right? Because if it's
Correct.
a female
Yes.
child, it would be easy to say, well, maybe that's, the mother's DNA or something. So they could prove that it was the child's DNA that ends up in the mother's brain. So
Wow.
when mothers say they feel a connection to their child, or they feel an intuition, or they feel a, uh, you know, almost a physical attachment still to our children that are wandering out there in the world somewhere, even when we don't know exactly where they are, we do, in fact, feel that, for
Wow.
life.
That's incredible.
Isn't it interesting? I just think it's fascinating. And yeah, and so whatever we do repeatedly shapes our brain. And so nurturing and raising a child, and that interaction between parent and child, we shape their brain and they shape our brain. There's
Mm,
this interpersonal neurobiology that we affect each other, we impact each other, and that shapes our development, so, and their development too. So
nice.
it's quite exciting. I mean, I do think that, I have a bias because I have three grown children and two grandchildren now, but I have a bias that, parenting is awesome, but I don't think everybody should be a parent if they don't want to be.
Absolutely.
Don't
Yeah,
make
yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
don't make yourself do it if you don't want to. But I do think it's an amazing, miraculous journey.
Indeed. Indeed. Agreed. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. So you have to, I think the book is in the background, isn't it? Isn't it the
Oh
book back
yeah,
there?
Frazzlebrain.
Yeah. You
Frazzlebrain.
got to show
Yeah.
people that. Show us that.
Frazzlebrain.
There we
I
go.
don't know if you can see it.
Nice.
Break free.
Yes.
It's got all kinds of cool little tips and tricks for calming yourself and dealing with interpersonal issues, and how to and it's designed to make you feel relaxed or more calm while you're reading it, because I know I used to recommend a lot of books on anxiety and stress management to my clients, and some of them would say it too stresses me out too much to read the book because it's a
Oh
lot of
no.
symptoms, and you're reading about all these issues. And so I wrote the book to have these little calming experiences throughout the book, so that actually the act of reading it can just calm the nervous system down. So
Oh, cool. Nice. I like it.
hopefully, yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yes, cool. No, that's awesome. And then do you have a website that, if someone's looking for
Yes,
coaching, that they can reach out to you and contact you?
exactly. Frazzlebrain.com. It's real easy. Frazzlebrain, one word, just like it sounds.
Okay,
And
cool.
and I will respond. Anybody sends me a message, I'll definitely respond. So I would love to hear from any listeners and, get feedback. And if I can be of help, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And then we're at that point in our show where we do our fill in the blank, which is our tradition on the show. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. All right. So the first one is, if I am fearless, I will.
I will boldly keep writing what I think is the right thing to write, even if other people might not like it.
Love it. That's great.
I've
Thank you
talked
for
myself into that
self-publishing if push
statement.
come to shove, right? Like, amen to that one. Oh my gosh. Well, this one is kind of similar, but to me, fearless freedom means.
Fearless freedom means being able to act despite my fear on the things that really matter.
Cool. Cool. And then the last one is, my battle cry is.
Don't quit.
Love it.
Keep on going. I'm not interested in quitting or retiring or anything. I want to keep on going. There's too much to be done.
Love that. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing the stories. Thank you for sharing your insights. This has been such a great conversation. I appreciate your time. And I know that people are going to go look up Frazzlebrain and check it out and benefit from it as well. So
thank you, Dr. G, for having me. And it is published by Central Recovery Press. I didn't publish it myself, but and I also write for Psychology Today on Frazzlebrain. It's called Frazzlebrain is the column that I write on Psychology Today. So if people just
awesome.
want some information and they don't want to have to buy a book, they can also just go online and look at the Psychology Today articles there. But it's been a pleasure to meet you, and I just love your work, and I wish you all the best too. What you're doing is great.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Fearless Freedom with Dr. G. Again, I'm Dr. G. And if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe so that you can get notified of when the next episode is going to be. And also, I'll catch you next time. Have a great one. Be strong, be brave, and unleash your greatness.